Hello and welcome. You're watching News Central Television. I am Judith TV, and here are some stories making rounds beyond the continent. And we begin the news in North America, where after intense debate and overnight sessions, the U.S. Congress has passed President Donald Trump's massive budget bill, known as the Big Beautiful Bill. The legislation critical to Trump's agenda includes permanent extensions of the 2017 tax cuts, deep cuts to Medicaid, increased funding for border security and defense, and a $5 trillion increase in the national debt ceiling. The House passed the bill narrowly after Republican speakers and leaders, including Speaker Mike Johnson, secured enough votes despite opposition from some conservative Republicans concerned about the rising deficit. Democratic Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries set a record with an 8-hour-plus speech opposing the bill, which critics say disproportionately benefits the wealthy and harms vulnerable communities. Trump hailed the passage as a major victory ahead of the July 4th deadline. Joining me now on the news is Joy John. She's a political analyst from Bellcrest Institute, and she joins us live from Washington, D.C. Joy, many thanks for joining us. How will the permanent extension of the 2017 tax cuts, and changes to deductions in the bill impact middle and lower income Americans compared to wealthier taxpayers?
Thanks for raising that, and thanks for having me on the program. This is one of the key questions Americans are asking right now. What does it mean for my household, my paycheck, my future? It's an important issue because it affects millions of families across the country. At the heart of this bill is a promise of tax relief, but the real impact over time depends on where you sit in the income bracket. For many middle and lower income families, the extension offers what I would term like a breather, with a modest reduction in their tax bill and maybe a small bump in their take-home salaries. But the reality is most substantial and lasting benefits go to the higher earners and large corporations. So over time, if the government does not find ways to offset this cost that we're looking at, we could see pressure on public services like healthcare, education, infrastructure, and that everyday Americans count on.
And what are the potentials of that, the potential consequences of that, right, of the proposed Medicaid and SNAP work requirements and funding cuts on vulnerable communities across the country? What will be the potential consequences in the long run?
So this is where many Americans are watching closely. Medicaid is a lifeline, not just for individuals, but for entire communities. We have seniors in long-term care, children being raised in low-income families, and people living with disabilities, veterans who fought to defend America. If of course, what we're looking at now, funding is reduced, especially at the state level, these services could become more difficult or harder to access. So even though the Trump administration says it is focused on controlling long-term spending, but the conversation now shifts to making sure the country's most vulnerable community are not left without support. And
just can you explain how the permanent extension of the 2017 tax cuts will affect everyday Americans, especially those in the middle and lower income brackets, just for the sake of our viewers?
Oh, I did say that. I said basically it might offer a breather with a modest reduction in the tax bill and a small increase or a slight increase in your take-home salary. But the reality is that most substantial and lasting benefits will favor the high earners and large corporations. It doesn't favor the lower income families. So it benefits more to the large corporations.
Right. And the bill is expected to add $3.3 trillion to the national debt over the next decade. How serious is this increase? What might it mean for the U.S. economy?
I lost the last part of your question.
Yeah, I was asking about, we understand that the bill is expected to add $3.3 trillion to the national debt over the next decade. My question is, how serious is this increase, and what will it mean for the U.S. economy in the long run?
The number $3.3 trillion, it sounds odd in my mouth. It's a big number and a huge addition to the national debt. Supporters of the bill, at the time or throughout the debates, believe that the economic growth will help offset, the cost that we're talking about or we're being debated. But historically, that is not guaranteed. As debt grows, so do interest payments, and that could limit how much we can invest in other priorities in the future. So it does not mean that, of course, there's crisis tomorrow, or there's, but it does raise important questions about the fiscal discipline and long-term stability for us.
And we saw some Republican lawmakers initially oppose the bill before falling in line. What did it say about the current political climate within the party itself?
It tells us a lot about the state of the party. There were initial concerns about the size of the bill, the cost, and even how it was structured and all that. But in the end, I would say party unity, won. It is also noteworthy to mention here that President Trump still has a very strong influence in the Republican Party amongst Republican lawmakers, and many of them, what we've just seen in the last maybe 30 minutes, of course, many of them are responding to what they see in their districts, and it's less about shifting values and more, I think, I would say, more political alignment in a polarized environment. So he does have an influence amongst the lawmakers. He has a hold, and he's had that hold since his first term as president.
All right. Well, Joy, I must say thank you for taking out the time to join us. Joy John, she's a political analyst with Bellcrest Institute, and she joined us live from Washington, D.C., giving us a bit of insight following the passing of the big, beautiful bill by President Donald Trump. We'll switch gears now. Still in the U.S., as the European Union is pushing to strike a political trade agreement with the United States by the July 9th deadline to avoid the reimposition of steep U.S. tariffs on EU goods. European Commission President, I beg your pardon, Ursula von der Leyen, said the EU is ready for a deal, but acknowledged that only a broad framework rather than a detailed pact is achievable in this short time frame. The EU seeks upfront tariff relief on key sectors like pharmaceuticals, semiconductors, and automobiles, as well as preparing countermeasures worth around 100 billion euro if talks fail. Now, German Chancellor Friedrich Merz called for a quick and simple deal, emphasizing its urgency for vital industries. Negotiators are meeting in Washington this week to finalize terms amid high stakes for the $1.8 trillion transatlantic trade relationship.
Reached. This is why we consulted on a rebalancing list, and we will defend the European interest as needed. In other words, all the instruments.
South Korean President Lee Jae-myung has pledged that his administration is doing its utmost to secure a trade deal with the United States ahead of the July 8th deadline set by President Donald Trump for imposing new country-specific tariffs. Speaking at a press conference marking his first month in office, Lee acknowledged the challenges, saying it's certainly not easy. That much is clear. He added, quote, "To be honest, I cannot say with confidence that we will be able to wrap everything up by July 8th. All I can say for now is that we're doing our utmost," end quote. The outcome is critical for South Korea's economy, given its significant trade ties with the U.S.
관세 협상이 매우 쉽지 않은 건 분명합니다. 지금 그렇다고 해서 7월 8일까지 끝낼 수 있는지도 확언하기 어려워요. 지금 최선을 다하고 있습니다. 최선을 다하고 있고 또 쌍방의 모두에게 도움이 되는 그야말로 호혜적인 그런 결과를 만들어내야 하는데 아직까지도 쌍방이 정확하게 뭘 원하는지가 명확하게 정리되지는 못합니다.
Let's also tell you that China has strongly opposed a new trade agreement announced by U.S. President Donald Trump with Vietnam, warning against moves it says undermine its national interests. Beijing's response, delivered via the Ministry of Commerce, cautioned that any trade agreement made at China's expense will face firm resistance. Now, the ministry stressed that China will take necessary measures to protect its economic rights if such deals pose a threat. The warning comes amid intensifying competition in the Asia-Pacific region, where Washington is strengthening ties with nations viewed as alternatives to China in global supply chains. The development marks a fresh escalation in trade tensions between the world's two largest economies, as both jockey for greater influence in regional commerce.
中方的立场是一贯的，我们乐见各方通过平等磋商解决与美方经贸分歧，但坚决反对任何一方以牺牲中方利益为手段达成交易。如果出现这样情况，中方将坚决予以反制，维护自身正当权益。
And watching news just beyond the continents, let's go on a short break. When we return, wildfire forces escalation or evacuation of thousands on Greek island. We have the details of this and plenty more just after the break. Stay with us. And welcome back. Costa Rica's President Rodrigo Chavez has sharply criticized the Supreme Court, describing it as a, quote, national disgrace or national embarrassment, I beg your pardon, and destroying its own credibility. The statement comes after the Supreme Court recommends that the Congress remove his immunity so he can be prosecuted on corruption charges. The court's recommendation follows allegations that Chavez misused funds from the Central American Bank for economic integration to benefit a close associate. The National Assembly, controlled by opposition parties, will decide whether to grant the court's request.
La Corte sigue destruyendo la poca credibilidad que tiene, sigue construyéndose en una vergüenza nacional, y lo digo con mucho dolor. Esto a mí no me satisface. Vea, ni la Corte ni el fiscal buscan justicia. Lo que buscan es sacarse un clavo que yo estoy orgullosísimo de haber clavado, un clavo que es que este gobierno ha expuesto las estructuras de grandes privilegios de los grupos poderosos en contubernio con la cúpula del Poder Judicial, y están haciendo lo que haya que hacer para proteger esas estructuras.
And off to Europe, where Russian President Vladimir Putin announced he will hold a phone call with U.S. President Donald Trump, marking their first publicly confirmed conversation in over 2 weeks. The call is scheduled to begin at 10 a.m. local time, according to Trump's post on Truth Social. Putin made the announcement during a visit to a Russian business exhibition ahead of a speech at the Strategic Initiatives Agency Forum. Now, this upcoming dialogue signals ongoing communication between the two leaders amid complex international relations. Observers will be watching closely for any developments or agreements resulting from the call.
Я сегодня буду разговаривать с президентом США, Трампом. Обязательно предложу ему воспользоваться вот этим материалом для того, чтобы продвигать на американский рынок.
Meanwhile, UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer backs Chancellor Rachel Reeves after she was seen crying in Parliament amid speculation about her future, saying she would remain in a role for, quote, a very long time to come, end quote. Starmer said that Reeves' tears were due to what he called personal matter and insisted he walks in lockstep with her. The emotional moment followed a welfare U-turn that wiped out nearly £5 billion in budget savings, causing the pound to slip over 1% and government borrowing cost to climb.
Chancellor, I'm not going to stand here and speak for the Chancellor, but as she's made clear on a number of occasions, yesterday was a personal issue, and I'm certainly not going to say anything more about that. I think it's just fantastic that she is here, and as I say, none of this would be happening if she hadn't taken the decisions that she's taken. So she took those decisions, and she'll be taking them for many years to come. I didn't appreciate what was happening because, as you'll probably appreciate, the PMQs is pretty wired. It goes from question to question, and I'm literally up, down, question, looking at who's asking me a question, thinking about my response and getting up and answering it. And so it wasn't just yesterday. No Prime Minister ever has had side conversations during PMQs. It does happen in other debates when there's a bit more time, but in PMQs it is bang, bang, bang. That's what it was yesterday, and therefore I was probably the last to appreciate anything else going on in the chamber. That's just a straightforward human explanation. No, I have every faith in my Chancellor. She has made incredibly important decisions in the last 12 months, and we wouldn't be doing what we're doing today without those important decisions. We work in lockstep and will continue to do so for a very long time.
A fast-moving wildfire has forced the evacuation of over 5,000 people, mostly tourists, from the Greek island of Crete. The blaze erupted near the village of Achila and, driven by gale force winds and extreme heat, quickly spread across 3 fronts, threatening homes, hotels and businesses in the Lira-Patra region. Emergency crews, 230 firefighters with 46 vehicles and 10 helicopters are battling the flames, but containment is proving difficult. Several people have been hospitalized with breathing problems, and some were rescued by boat after being cut off by fire. Authorities have issued urgent alerts and closed roads, warning residents and visitors to stay away as the risk of wildfires remains extremely high. In Oceania, Austria has deported a Syrian criminal convict back to Syria, marking the first official EU deportation of its kind in nearly 15 years, according to the Austrian Interior Ministry. Now, the move follows the fall of Bashar al-Assad's regime in December and reflects a shift in European deportation policy. Interior Minister Gerard Karner described the action as part of a tougher, more consistent asylum strategy. Speaking en route to Bulgaria, he framed the deportation as a sign of fair but strict enforcement. Austria has suspended Syrian asylum applications and family reunifications since the regime change, pushing for repatriation policies. Roughly 100,000 Syrians reside in Austria, home to one of Europe's largest Syrian diasporas. Now, this follows growing anti-migration sentiment, which saw far-right parties lead Austria's recent national elections. And off to France, as the country has condemned the espionage charges against its citizens Cécile Coula and Jacques Paris, detained in Iran for over 3 years, calling the accusations, quote, completely unjustified and unfounded, end quote. And this comment was made by the French Foreign Minister Jean-Noël Barrot. The couple, arrested in May 2022, they face serious allegations, including spying on Israel's Mossad, plotting to overthrow the Iranian regime, and corruption on earth, all carrying the death penalty. And off to Asia, with tragedy in Indonesia as at least 5 people are dead and dozens still missing after a ferry sank in rough seas en route to Bali. Rescue teams are in a race against time. Our international correspondent Afia Hagen has the details.
Search and rescue teams in Indonesia are scouring the waters between Java and Bali after a ferry carrying 65 passengers and crew sank in the middle of the night. So far, 31 people have been pulled from the water alive, but the search continues for 29 others who remain unaccounted for. The ferry left Ketapang port in Java and was bound for Bali's Gilimanuk port, a busy route that takes about an hour. But just before midnight on Wednesday, disaster struck. Officials blamed rough seas and bad weather. Waves were up to 2.5 meters high, with strong currents and winds. Indonesia's President Subianto, currently in Saudi Arabia, ordered an emergency response. The National Rescue Agency has dispatched boats and helicopters with over 50 personnel on site. It's unclear whether any foreign nationals were on board. The ferry was also transporting 22 vehicles, including 14 trucks. Marine accidents are tragically common in Indonesia's 17,000 island archipelago, a combination of bad weather, aging vessels, and lax safety enforcement. In 2018, over 150 people died when a ferry sank in Sumatra. Just earlier this year, an Australian woman was killed in another capsizing off Bali. Tonight, as darkness approaches, rescuers say they'll keep searching, expanding their efforts along the currents, hoping to bring more survivors home. For News.
Many thanks to Afia for that report, and that's all we can take from beyond the continent. Now, do remember, they can send us your eyewitness report to the WhatsApp number now showing on the screen. To follow us on social media, by the way, we're at News Central TV on all social media platforms. You can always watch News Central live on 5 platforms. First is DSTV, channel 422. There's also GoTV, channel 23, Star Times as well, channel 274. Download Avo TV on your smart TV and watch us live as well. We'll stream us 24/7 on YouTube. That makes it 5. Many thanks for watching. I am Judith at TV. Good night.